Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is day 9 of Oracle integration training. And in this session, we will learn about making clone of integrations, just like we are going to create duplicate integrations in OIC and what all other components we have so that we can create a clone of that. We'll see that in this session. Later, we will go for mappers. So as we know that most of the endpoint when we are adding in integrations, we are getting mappers for that. That mapper is something that is going to help us to provide the values to that specific endpoint that we will see that how we can add ad hoc mapping in our integrations, just like additional mappings we can add. Then we'll go for OIC editions, which is pending from last few days. We'll cover today and we'll talk about the service limitations of OIC and their components, just like we have limitations of integrations, adapters, or we can say the connections and all we will cover in this session. We will talk about that all the 7 roles offered by Oracle integrations, and we'll see that what all roles can help the user to perform what kind of operations. So all this we are going to cover in this session. So let's start with the clone of that integrations. So when we are saying that cloning of the integration, it means that we have that integrations already created and we just want to create a duplicate of that integration. So that is called as cloning in integration. So obviously, when our integration is created and it's in working conditions and all, and we want to create a copy of that integration and do some changes doing using that specific integration for different purposes. Yes, we can do so that whatever configuration and endpoints logic are there in the integrations, we don't need to rewrite the logics entire logic again and again. So that's why we have option of cloning. So when we are creating clone of integration, so while creating the clone of integration, they will ask you to provide the new name. They will ask you to provide the identifier versions and of uh, can you come again? Yeah, I started the recording already. That's from different. I'm not started this time from June. So yeah, thank you so much for reminding. Yeah. So when we are saying that cloning of the integration, so once you will create clone of integrations, that's like creating the duplicate copy of that integration. So while creating, they will ask you to provide some information, which includes obvious new integration name, an identifier for that new integrations that the copy you are going to create, and they will ask that the versions. Obviously by default it will be look like that from where you are going to create clone, but yes, they will ask you to provide another one if you want. And the packages and basic details, the description of the integrations and all we can provide while creating the clone of integrations. So when we are saying that clone of integration, so it's not only that you can create clone of integrations, right? So you have option to create clone of connections. You can create clone of lookups and all. And obviously, when you are going to create connections, cloning of the connections or lookups, so whatever value or data or credentials are there in that connections, it will replicate in that the newly created clone created the connections and all. So, and obviously, if we have lookup, so we have not covered lookup yet, but yes, in upcoming days we are going to cover lookup also. So in lookup, if suppose we have few values, 4 to 5 records are there in the lookup. If you will create clone of that lookup, so all these 4 to 5 values will be copy in that new duplicate created lookups. So all these are about the lookups and all. So we'll see in the sessions only we'll go for live practical, and we'll see that how we can create clone and what all other features are there in the clone. So just for brief on that integrations, when we are creating clone, the clone integration is an independent copy or the changes made it will affect the original integration. So no, so for example, we are going to create a copy of integrations and we done changes in the copy the integration. So obviously it will not reflect changes in the previous one because we just created a duplicate of the integration and we are going to do changes in the duplicate integration. So it will something like that you created newly integrations, right? So there will not be any link between your integrations and the copy you created. And obvious when we are going to create clone of integration, we can change the name. So when if you remember yesterday we learned about that creating a new version of integration. So that new version when we are creating new versions, so they are not allowing us to change the integrations name or the integration identifier. But yes, while creating clone of integration, so as it's going to create a new integrations by just taking a copy of the previous integration, so they will allow you to change the name, identifier, and all the other details. So that's basic brief on that integration cloning. We'll see all these things. we have another one which is mapper. So in OIC we know, we are already aware about that, right? That mapper is going to help us to provide the values to the endpoint. For example, we added one endpoint and that endpoint required some values, right? So that's why we are using mapper. For example, we created app-driven integration, and in the app-driven integrations, by default, when we configure integrations, would be return any response. So by default, mapper got added. We saw that in our previous practical videos. So this mappers, we are mapping the values in the mapper only, so that based on the mapper value, whatever we added, it will return the response of that integrations, right? So that integration trigger endpoint which we added, by which we are going to take a request, and the same helping us to return back the response. So with the help of this mapper only, we are going to return back the response of that integration. Obviously, we have mapper action also, that by default it's displaying or it's adding into the integration canvas. But yes, we have option so that we can additionally add mappers when we require. So we'll see one of the practical where we can see that how we can add additional mapper to the integrations and why we will use all these things we are going to see. So let's move to the OIC instance and we'll see that how we can add ad hoc mapper. So ad hoc mapper is something that additional mapper we are going to add in our integration. So let's move to that OIC instance and we'll see. So here we'll go for design. In the design integration, so this is the integration which already created, this one, right? FOAS app design switch. So what this integration is going to do, if you will see, right? So this integration is quite simple. That this integration is, sorry, this integration is quite simple, that taking added the endpoint here. This is a trigger endpoint which is responsible for getting the values from user, and in response it's going to return some values. So we are going to play with this endpoint also only. So here we added few variables. That variable is going to store some values. So we created var result. This var result is going to store the result values and all. And here we added the switch, and in the switch we added the condition. So what condition we added in the switch? So you can see this is the trigger endpoint. If you will open this trigger endpoint, so here you can see in this integration we added two query review parameters, that's num1 and num2. And here you can see the configure this endpoint to receive a response is enabled. It means that this integration will return something in response. So if you will go next, all these parameters added here, you will be able to see the parameters is pnum1, pnum2, and the third parameter is operations, right? That is the query parameter. So these three values we will expect, or we will send while running these integrations. And once this integration will be executed, in the response we will get some value. So what value we will get? So you can see the JSON sample is already there. So if you will click here in the inline, you will be able to see the response. You can see when this integration will be executed, we will see this kind of response, that result, and it will be the values. So how it's going to work? So if you will see, so here in the switch we added conditions. So in root one, that is the condition one, if operation is equals to a double d add, then what we are going to do inside this switch block or switch scope, we are added one assign, and with the help of assigned, we updated the variable value of var result to addition of the above two numbers, that num1 and num2 we are receiving in the request. Same way, we added condition for checking that another operation which is sub for subtract, and inside this scope, we added the logic to do the subtraction of two numbers and assign into the result. So same way for the third condition, we have multiplication, that's MUL, and this multiplication is responsible for doing the multiplying two numbers and assigning the result into the result variable. And in otherwise case, that is if all of the condition will be false, it will move inside this block and it will provide the value like the operators you provided is not correct. And in last, you can see we added the logger, and after that we are mapper here, right? We are able to see the mapper. In the mapper we added the value so that that value can be written as a response. You can see, right? So here this is the result endpoint which we configure as a response payload, and that variable where result we mapped here, so that when this integration will be executed, this where result variable values will be mapped to this result, and this is the response of integration, so that this integration will return its value. So let me run this integration once so that I can show you the example here. So just I'm going to click on run, and you can see when we are going to run, it's asking the parameters. So first parameters, anything you can provide. So I'm giving you 10 and 6. And here the operations you can provide. So the conditions we had, right? We added condition a double d for additions. So now these three values are there. All these are added in the URI. And once you will click on run, so it will do the operations and it will return the value in response. Right? You can say 12 and 6 is 18, right? So instead of addition, if I will go for that's multiplication. So it's going to return values, right? That's 72. 12 into 6 is equals to 72, right? So now it's working fine, right? But if you will see in the integration, so in the integrations, let me open this one. Yeah, you can say. So these are the conditions, and in each and every conditions, what we have done, we added the endpoint. We added the assign variable, assign action to update the variables, right? Variables of value, variables value, right? The result variable. So instead of that, what we can do? So here you can see this is the mapper. This mapper is responsible for returning the values, right? So what we can do, we can add this mapper here so that when integration will be completed. So instead of doing this assign all this one, the integration will responsible or it will return that as specific values. So whenever this will find execute any of the block. So obvious in this case we required mapper. So we required one mapper here, we required another mapper here, another mapper, and all these things, right? All the mappers we required. So instead of doing changes in the integrations, I want to create a copy of this integration, right? So that our integration, this integration will be same, but I will create a duplicate of the integration so that I can do the changes in the duplicate applications, right? Integration. Sometimes for just doing the testing, debugging things, you need to create integrations, right? So that whatever R&D you have to do, you can do in that newly duplicate created integrations. Later on, you can delete the integrations. So what I will do, I will just create a copy of this integration, just like creating a clone of that integration. So once you will click on this three dot, you can see, right? So once you will click here, you will see the option as clone. So once you will click on clone, the copy of this integrations will be created. You can see clone integration wizard, and here you have to provide the name, provide the identifier, provide the version, and URL, keywords, packages, the description, anything if you want. I don't want to provide anything. So what I will do, I will just provide the name. So I will to provide the name as FOSINT002 AP assign switch 0002. I will give two. So here you can see when I done here, ID identifier automatically got changed. If you want, we can change here. Otherwise, we will make it be same. So just go ahead, clone. Once you will click on clone, you can see another integration got created, that FOSINT AP assign switch 1. This one, right? So this another integration got created and a status is in configure because that was the ready to run integration, right? So we don't have any error in this integration. If you want, we can just activate this integration and we can execute this integration, and this integration will be working fine, same as that previous one, right? Because we created a duplicate copy of that integration, right? So if we will click on run, here let's provide the value as 1020 and that value as like SUV sub for subtract. So once you will click here, you can see the 02 integration will return the response -10. It means that when we create a clone, that it ready to made integration, ready to run integration will be created, and whatever endpoint connections we added in this one, same will be there in the newly created clone integration. So let me deactivate this integration so that I can do the changes. Now here you can see configured. Let me edit this integration, right? So this is the endpoint, the mapper endpoint, which is returning the response. So you can delete this mapper here. If you will go here, you can see we have option to delete. So if you will delete this mapper, the mapper will be deleted from here. Why it's not going to delete? Let me check in. So let me check it's okay. So here you can see this mapper is there. Let me make it at same places. I will tell you this the features of integration generation 3 that we can do cut and copy paste here. So you can see this is the mapper, right? And if you want to remove this mapper from here and want to add the mapper here, right? So what we can do? So earlier in generation 3, it was just like reposition. So here in this canvas, we have option to reposition. So once you going to click on the repositions, it will allow you to drag this endpoint and move to anywhere. But in generation 3, they remove that option to drag and drop. So instead of that, what they added? So they added the concept of cut, copy, paste. So for example, this is the endpoint. We want to cut this endpoint from here and we want to paste this endpoint here in this scope, right? The first scope. So what you have to do, you just have to select the endpoint. So once you selected the endpoint, here you can see you have icon for cut, right? So once you will cut, it will be removed from here, and whenever you will paste, that will be added there. This is the one way. Another way is that here you just click on this three line and you will see the option as uh, sorry, here you can see option is cut. So delete is not working, maybe due to that this is the single mapper added here. So I will show you that how we can delete. For example, this logger I want to delete. So just click here, click on delete. This logger will be deleted. Let me see why it's not going to delete. There is some issue with this connection. Let me go back, refresh the page. Let me do it again. Yeah, you can see. So once we are going to click on delete, it asking that do we want to delete? So yes, I want to delete that node from there, right? So just click on delete, it will delete the mapper from this integration page. So right now you can see, right? This is our integration and this integration doesn't have mapper as we deleted, right? So now if we want to add the mapper, that's called ad hoc addition, right? Addition of the mapper. So go to the action and you can see there is one action called map, right? So this is the mapper. So if you will drag this mapper again in the canvas, so somewhere we have plus icon, yeah, right? So you can see the mapper name will be available here. So right now in this integration, there is only one endpoint missing without mapper. That's why you are able to see the endpoint name, that is start rest. And it's saying that the mapper you are going to add, that mapper will be linked to this start rest endpoint. And what is the start rest endpoint? The first trigger endpoint we added the name as start rest and based on the connection FOS rest tree connection. So just click on create. So the new mapper which we are going to add will be added in our canvas. So you can see this is the configuration for the mapper only. So just click on validate. I don't want to do any mapping here. Go back. Right, you can see the mapper added here. We have not mapped any values, but just we delete the mapper, and if you want to add the mapper again, so that way just go to action and you can drag and add the mapper in your integration canvas. Right, this is the adding the mapper concept, right? Now another thing is that if you want to remove the mapper or remove any endpoint from one places to any places, right? So what you can do, just click on this three dot and here you have option for cut. Just click here, you can see it seems like that it's about to remove from here, right? So now where you have to paste? So I just want to paste in this root one, right? So just click on this plus icon and you will be able to see the option to paste. You can see this is the option for paste. Just click here. So your mapper will be removed from here and it will be added in this point, right? So again, I don't want to display the log message here. I will delete the logger. Now you can see our integration having the mappers and integration having mapper only when integration will be moved to the root one. Root one is add. So if user will provide operation as a double t add, then what it will do, it will assign the value to this endpoint, and after assigning the value to this endpoint, what it will do, it will here we can map, right? We can map the value here. We can map that variable directly. You can say the var result, we can map that variable direct here, validate and go back. So you can see when this block will be executed, it will do the addition and the value whatever will be there in the variable, that will be linked to the mapper and integration will return the mapping. And after that it will come outside and you can see we have the return endpoint, so that integration will be completed. So let me save this integration and I will show you another example, right? So this is our integration. I'm just going to activate this integration. So integration is activated. Just we have to run this integration. So if you will go to run, and now you can see The operation is add here. Let me add, right? So if I will click on run, so it will go to the block and it will return the values. And instead of add, if I will provide any operation, sub, so even it will not show the error message. It will not return anything. Integration will be executed, but it will not return anything. So why it's not returning anything? Just because we added the conditions, and in the conditions it's doing the operations, right? It's doing the perform, but we have not mapped anything, right? In case of this other operation then add, it is not going to return you anything, right? That's why we are not able to see any result. So again, to add this one, we will go back, edit the integration. Now here, as we want to return the value in case of other operations too, right? So again, we have to add the mapper here, right? But it's not logical, right? That for each and every block you are adding this mapper, that this mapper will be removed from here to here, right? That's why we have option to add another mapper. So you can see this is the mapper. Just drag the mapper here, or just click here and search the map, right? So you can see mapper will be added here. So just again, it's asking that the endpoint name is start race. That's correct. Click on create. I'm not going to map any value here. I will just give you a simple example. Then we'll add. So here you can see. So you can have one query, right? That if the previous integration was working fine, if we have only one mapper, right? Then why we do need to add multiple mappers in the same integration? If it was working earlier fine, then why we are going to map multiple mapper, right? So that's why this variable here, right? So in this variable, first we are doing the addition operation and storing the addition values into that variable. Then we are mapping this variable here, right? That's not required if we are going to use mapper directly. So what I will do, I will remove this variable from here. So right now we don't have the addition number, addition values, but we have the mapper, right? So what I will do, I will directly map the addition values to this mapper. Just click in mapper here, go to the response. This is the result, right? So we remove the mapper. So just delete here, and in the template parameters, we have two values, right? Num1 plus num2. Just make a confirm here. So you can see the result will store now the value num1 plus num2, right? Whatever we given. So that's fine. Just click on validate and go back. So now this endpoint added. So if the operation will be ADD, control will move inside, and in the response of integration, it will return the addition of that two numbers. Same way we have to do with subtraction. So I will delete this variable here. We don't require that variable as we are going to use multiple mapper, right? So just double click here in the mapper to edit the mapper. Now you can see, just expand this one, and this is the result, right? Again, I want to map the value that num1 to that variable. It's added. You can see here num1, and I want to add another mapper, right? So if you drag the mapping, you will not be allowed to add here, right? You will not be allowed to add. So what you have to do, you just have to edit this endpoint. So just edit here. This got added incorrectly, so remove this one. So this is the num1, and I want to do the subtraction with num2. So I will do minus, and this is num2 here. So these two endpoint added. Just click on save. You can see this two is going to map on the same endpoint with the operations we added, right? The subtract operations. Just go validate and go back. Now we added two mappers. Now again we have to remove this mapper and we'll add another mapper. So just click here, and you can see this is the mapper. Drag the mapper here. Again, I will select the same start rest endpoint, and here we have to provide the mapping value. So just expand here result. What I will do, just select n1 so that this result will be created as a node. Edit here, and here I will add the subtraction multiplication operation, that is a star. Take here, you can see this two endpoint is going to map with the operation asterisk. validate, go back. Now you can see these three are added. So now in this one, we have the few hard-coded values, right? So I will just copy this value here so that I don't want to write this text again. Sometimes the browser is getting issues. That's why it's going to remove. So just click here. This is the value I'm going to copy. So just click outside. I just have to remove this mapping here, the assign. And instead of that, we have to add the mapper. So I will just go. This is the mapper. I will drag the mapper here. And what value we want to map? So that's the hard-coded value in case of otherwise. Otherwise means if all condition got failed. So here, what I will do, this is the result. Right click here, click on create target node. Anything you can do, you can directly drag the value here, but as we have only hard coded value, suggest you have to go creating the target node, edit here, provide the value. So instead of that, providing the message like the operator ope operator you provided is not correct, I just want to display the operator name also, right? The value we are passed. So what I will do, I will use concat function. I already explained this point, right? The operator. And here we have to provide the operator name. What is the operator or the operator value? So I will use single quotes. Now here we have to add the operator, whatever we receive, just in bracket, right? So here, what I will do, I will open the query parameters. This is the operation. So I will use operations here. Now, this is one value separated by single quotes. This is another values, and here we have comma, right? And this is another values, and after that we have the another value. So what I will do, we have to provide the comma here, and then after all this value will start from single quotes. Single quotes, and here, so you can see this is the bracket open for values. So again I will do the hard coded bracket close for that value, and you provided it is not correct. Just take here. So somewhere we have done mistake here. Let me see. Yeah. So you can see this is the bracket open for concat function and we didn't close. So just I have to close this one. So now you can see mapper is done. So just click on validate and go back. You can see our integration having all the mappers. So if this after getting the values, it this scope will started the switch scope, and here we added the condition. If this condition will true, control will move inside this one. It will provide the mapper, and after that control will come outside this switch, and after the switch integration is going to return the values using this mapper. So whatever value will be there in the mapper, this value will be returned. Same way we done with all other three conditions, right? So just save the integration, go back and activate this integration. So now here you can see once we activated the integrations, we can execute. So just go run, and here we have to provide the value. So let's we put the same value, click on run. You can see in case of subtract is showing the subtract values. If I will use mul, that's for multiplication, it will return the values for multiply. And if I will provide the values as add, it will return the addition of these two number at 30. And if you will provide any other random values, just like division, that div we have not configured, right? So if you will click here, it will display the operator div you provided is not correct. So that's integration working fine. That's the use of adding the mappers, and obviously we learn about how we can create clone of integration. So the same way we are going to create clone of integrations, we can create clone of connections too. So go to the connection, and here you can see, suppose this is the connection created ms ftp con. If you will click on this three dot, you will be able to see the option as clone. If you will click here, clone, again it will ask you the connection name, connection identifier. Let's go to remove, right? So just click on clone again. Connection name, identifier, and connection role, that obviously you cannot change, and the keywords or any description. So once you will click on this clone, that your copy connections will be created. You can say this is the copy connections, and if you will open the connection, you will be able to find that the credentials are already added. You just have to go and you have to save this integration to make it 100% connection. Sorry. So I'm just going to discard. So the same way we created clone of integration, we can create clone of connection. Another way we have lookup. So we will explain this lookup part later when we will go for practical of this lookup. So here you can see lookup, EMP lookup is created. If you can see if this lookup having two domain, two values map, right? If I will click clone of this lookup, right? I don't want to change any name. I'm going to delete one. Just click on clone. You can see integration lookup clone created and having the same two domain, two values, right? If you will open this lookup, you will be able to see the lookup values. So these two are the domain, the con code, con name is the domain, and these two are the values 0 1 0 2 4, that one. So that's are the basic of creating clone of integrations. And but obviously you cannot create clone of libraries, clone of packages, and all. So this is all about integrations cloning, and that obvious cloning the integration objects and all. Now let's move to the next slide where we will discuss about the editions. So now when we are talking about edition, it is like that when we are getting provision of Oracle integration instance. So what all features or flexibilities we are getting with the instance. So when you are creating Oracle integration instance, you have two, three, earlier it was two options, but now we have three options to create. The first and common one is standard, another one is enterprise, and the third one which is added recently is for healthcare edition. In healthcare editions, they added various components and additional things related to healthcare services. So I'm not going to go deep in that one. So we'll focus on this standard and enterprise only. So there is no much differences between a standard and the enterprise editions in case of OIC applications. But just if you are going to purchase OIC instance for a standard, you will have few limited services, and if you are going to create OIC for enterprise, you will get bit more flexibilities, more objects to work on. And obviously, this table is going to explain you all this about. So for example, you can see integrations Visual Builder, that's VBCS, and the adapters, standard adapters, whatever are there in the instance, are same for all these three. Either it can be that a standard edition, it can be that enterprise editions or healthcare. Each and every integration, you will get all these three components. But yes, there is enterprise adapters, which few examples of enterprise adapters you are able to see that obviously they mentioned that the Oracle EBS adapters, Oracle JD Edwards, and some other adapters just like SAP adapters and all. You will find these enterprise adapters only when you will take a instance with edition as an enterprise. So you can see that the enterprise adapters are available only in the standard. It is only in the enterprise editions, but not available in the standard editions. And when we will talk about PCS, that is process cloud services, that's known as process automation. So again, process automations of PCS is not available in the standard edition. So if you are going to create your OIC instance by selecting the edition as a standard, you will not be able to find the option for process cloud services or B2B, right? But yes, if you will going to create integrations instance for standard or editions, the file server you will find in all these editions. File server and obvious the recipe already created or the simple dummy integrations already created in this OIC instance, you will find in all this one. And these three are the basic integration, basic components specifically related to healthcare, which you will not be able to find in a standard edition or in that the enterprise editions. You will get only in that the available healthcare editions. And there is one questions which is going to ask in that the certification exam of OIC. They are asking about the services available for enterprise editions and all. So obviously you can see here, right? PCS is not available in that the standard editions. And there is one more that the enterprise adapters also are not there in the standard editions. So if you will follow these tables and just have a look, so that's kind of questions is going to ask in that OIC certification too. And of course, most of the interview they are asking that, can you just brief me the differences between that standard editions and that enterprise editions file creating the integration instance and all. So now we got to know about the flexibilities and the offers components by you selecting the editions of integrations. Now we have that services, and obviously each and every services having their own limitations in Oracle integrations. So we'll talk about that one. So first we will talk about the limitations of connections, that the connections we are going to use, or obviously we can say adapters. So without adapter we don't have connections. So that's why adapters and connection in term of service limitation is considered as the same. So when we are saying that the adapters limitation, so yes, when we are creating trigger connections and that trigger connection is having some values to run. So limitation is 100 MB for that the endpoint which we are going to configure in this integration, and the same 100 MB limitation is for that if that is private endpoint and all. So when we are saying that this endpoint, so we are talking about this is integrations, right? So when we are going to run this integration, if you will run this integration, here you can say, so we use the REST endpoint to configure this request and the response payload, right? If you remember one of the integration we created where we added the request payload, and in the request payload here we are providing the JSON values. So the first point is saying that if we are using that one, so the data size of the JSON value cannot be more than 100 MB. So if it's going to be 100 MB, it will throw an error. So the same way for response also, if we are running this integration and we are expecting some response that cannot go beyond that limitation. So that's all about that the service limitation for OIC. So each and every integration having their own limitations. And obvious, if suppose you created one integration and that integration you want to provide a attachment as a request payload, and you want that integration should be have a flexibilities to get a attachment as a response request. So again, we have that limitation that attachment size cannot go beyond that 1 GB of size. So if you are providing the attachment while running the integration, so when we are talking about the attachments, for example, this is our integration. And instead of providing the value here, right, 10, 20, 50, and providing the JSON request payload, we can upload the attachment here, right? So that's they are talking about that one. If we are going to upload the attachment, that size cannot be go beyond that 1 GB of size. So same way when we are talking about that connectivity agent, and obviously it's having their own limitations again of 50 MB. That connectivity agent that we are using, that endpoint cannot have that size of that data that can be the request payload or response payload at more than 50 MB. So obvious all this when we will go for agent and all, we will talk about all these things. We'll learn. Another we have file adapters. So that file adapter is something that we are going to pick the file from somewhere else that can be the file server or our local system. So again, it's having the limitation of 1 GB that we cannot download the file up to file having more than 1 GB of size. So obviously it allows to download the file below 1 GB. So if any file are there in the server and we want to download the file in OIC, we can download using that up to 1 GB of size. And obviously, if we want to read the data of that file, so the file size cannot be more than 50 MB. So using file adapter, if you created one connection and with the help of that connection, if you want to download the file or if you want to read the file from that file server, that can be your local machine, that local file server, that file size cannot be go more than 50 MB. And if your file size is more than 50 MB, you should go for download operation instead of read operation of the file adapter connection. The same way we have FTP adapters. So FTP is something that file server connections. So with the help of FTP adapter, we are creating file server connection. And if you are using that connection, right, so it's having the limitation. If we are going to download the file, obvious again, it can download the file up to 1 GB of size. And if we are going to read the data of file directly in OIC, so we cannot go more than 100 MB of file size. If our file size is 100 MB placed over server, we can read. If that file size is more than 100 MB, we cannot directly read. So obviously in upcoming session when we will work on file, so we'll explain you the differences between reading the file, downloading the file, reading file in segment, all these things. But yes, I have to cover the service limitations here. That's why I touched this point, touch the topic. So once I will go for that using this file adapter, FTP adapters, you will get to know about this point. What is the meaning of this, all these things. So again, we have REST adapter having the same limitations of 100 MB. And if you are passing file, it can be go up to 1 GB. SOAP adapter having also the same
Same like 50 MB of endpoint based on agent, and directly it can be 100 MB of size as a request and response payload. If we are using database adapters in our connections to make a connectivity between database, so obvious that database connectivity is when we are using in OIC, so we are expecting some data coming from database in OIC, or we have to pass some data to database using OIC. So obvious they have again time limitations, and that the size data size limitations of 100 MB when we are not using agent. And if we are using agent to extract the data from database or to put the data into database, we cannot go beyond that 50 MB. And obviously, if we will go for ATP database or any database adapters, we will have PL/SQL package invocation option. So when we are going to invoke the PL/SQL package, it should not return data which can be more than 10 MB of size. So this all comes under the service limitation. So same we have for Oracle EBS adapters, for connectivity agents and all. So you are able to see here, right? So this is a timeout error. So for example, we created connection. That connection is going to make a connectivity between database. So sometimes it can be delay while server issues and all. So it can wait up to 4 minutes, 5 minutes based of endpoint. If it will take more than 4 minutes of time to make a connectivity, it will throw an error. It cannot go beyond that. So it was all about the service limitation of adapters, which we learned. Now we have service limitation of integrations. So let's see. So when we are talking about service limitation of integration, so even we discussed the same in day one only, that if we are going to create OIC instance, and in instance we are going to create connections. So at the same time, like integration, active integration cannot be more than 800. So for example, if you will go to the integration, go back here, sorry, integrations, you can see all these are the active integration, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this active count cannot be more than 800. So that's the integration limitations. Again, the string variable we are using in our integration, right? So here in this integration, we created variable, a string variable as var result. So that's having the limitation that the variable cannot hold more than 10,000 of character, right? In upcoming sessions, we are going to learn about parallel action. That parallel action allow us to execute multiple endpoints at the same time. And obviously, we cannot add more than five endpoint or five parallel in our integration. So that's the limitation. And for the same, we have subscribe to OIC or subscribe or publish OIC, right? In Generation 3, it's moved to that event and subscribe. So we cannot have more than 50 integration that can subscribe to event per OIC instance. So the same limitation we have for the time. So maximum duration of integration flow. So for in case of synchronous, it will be 5 minutes only. In case of synchronous, it will be only 5 minutes. In case of asynchronous, that is that after an integration which doesn't have any response or any schedule integrations, both are that's asynchronous integration. And that asynchronous integration time execution time can be 6 hour, max to max 6 hour it will execute. And if integration instance is running beyond after that 6 hour, it will throw an error, timeout error. So this is the service limitations for integrations request and response payload, that the synchronous or asynchronous integration. For the same stage file operation, if we have to read the file in OIC, so if file having more than 100 MB of size, we cannot directly use read entire file operations. In a stage file, we have option for read entire file, which allows us to read the data of file or content of the file. If file size is more than 100 MB, we cannot directly read. That's why we have read file in segment operations, which allow us to read the file of data up to 1 GB. So that's the obvious differences you can see. And read in segment, when we are using operation of a stage file, we can read up to 1 GB of file, and each and every file will be read in different segment, and maximum segment count can be 2000 for each and every segment or each and every iteration. So it cannot go beyond 2000 of segment. So when we are saying that segment of 2000, for example, a data file having 100 record. So for example, a data file having 5000 record, right? So at one time or one segment or one iteration, it will read only 2000 record max to max. Again, it will take another iteration, and next iteration it will again read 2000 record, and now we have 4000 record, right? So now 1000 record remaining, so it will again iterate next time, and you will find up to 2000 of records. And obviously if there is only 1000 record, that will be like able to read in OIC. So that's about the region segment. Again, I already discussed the synchronous integration and asynchronous integration. So asynchronous integration can have the time limitation of 6 hours, but in synchronous we have time limitation of 300 seconds, that is by 5 minutes only. And there's obvious we have column length. That lookup column length cannot go beyond 324 characters. So that's the limitation we have. We have limitations for notifications. So if we are adding notification to send an email, that the notification having the attachment cannot go more than 2 MB of size. And number of email what we can send every day from instance is 10,000. We cannot send more than 10,000 email notifications to our email using OIC. That's the limitations. If we are going to use JavaScript functions and all, having each and everything's having their own limitations, right? And so JavaScript function having the time limitations of execution, that is 5 seconds. If your JavaScript function is going to take more than 5 seconds, obviously it will create problem and it will throw you an error in your integration. So that all things we will learn in our sessions, that how we can add JavaScript functions. Now we talk about the service limitations of integrations. We talk about service limitation of connection. Now we have the last point for this session is roles in OIC. So OIC provide various role, and that all roles having their different purposes, different access. So for example, the super user or the main user having all the accesses are service administrator. That service administrator user, it means that your user will be created in OIC instance, and that user will have a role as service administrators. They can do lots of things. They can create integrations, they can delete integrations, they can do various operations. We'll see in upcoming slides. So roles define that the privileges available to user and the tasks that they can perform, that I explained, that if we are going to create a user for OIC instance, what kind of privileges or what kind of actions we are going to allow to that user. Based on that, we will assign roles to that user. So that's a role we have here as service administrator, the topmost role having all the accesses. Then we have service developer, which is responsible for creating the integrations and on many things we will see here. We have service monitor, we have service user, service invoker, and service viewer. So we have total of six, right? Sorry, total of six integrations role available in OIC. We'll see all this one by one. So if we will talk about the roles according to integration, so with the help of roles, that user, what all kind of operations they can perform from Oracle integrations, you can see the user service administrator having all this access to all perform all these transactions. Like they can create integrations. You can see these all are actions. All these actions are related to integration, right? So if user having service administrator role, they can create integration, they can create new versions, they can view, edit, delete, activate, all these operations they can perform. For example, uh, I have created OIC instance, created one user, but I don't want to provide that import and export flexibility to that user, right? So what kind of role you have to select to that user? You can see import and export having, which all having this access. So service administrator having this access, service developer having this access, service monitor having not having this access, right? We can assign service monitor role to the user if you don't want to give this accessibility. But obvious, if you will see, if the user having service monitor role, they cannot import and export, but also they cannot create a new version of the integrations. So all these things you have to take care about while assigning the roles. So all these roles having different accesses, different privileges. So for example, for creating the integrations, only service administrator and service developer role having the access. If your user having service administrator and service developer role, then only you can create integration in instance just by clicking on this create button. If your user doesn't have this service administrator and service developer role, you will not be able to create integration. You can see if you're having the service monitor, you cannot create integration. But here service monitor, what you can do, they can just view the integrations which is already created. They can see that, sorry, not the created. So they can just go or monitor the navigations, and they can just have a look on this, the integration execution status and all. Same way we have available all these roles, and based on that we have different tasks. So even you can see these were the tasks. Additionally, we have that configuration, that configure endpoint. It means that we can change the connections of that integration. We can replace the connections and all. And you can see that we have option to unblock, unlock and all. So if you remember, our integration got locked last time. And if you want to unlock your integration, your user should have that service administrator and service developer roles. Without this role, your user won't be able to unlock your integration. Obviously, if you want to schedule your integrations, you should have that privileges or roles for service administrator and the service developer. If your user having the service monitor, service scheduler and all, you cannot, you can schedule integrations if you have service user role, but you cannot schedule integration if you have the service monitor role only. So all these are about the roles and privileges for that roles. So same way we have for connections. For obvious, if your user having the role of service administrator, we can perform all these operations on that connections. You can create connection, edit, delete, view, test, create clone of connections and all. If your user having that service user role or service invoker role, you cannot create clone of your connection. Same way we have for lookup. Also, if your user having these roles, based on that roles only, user can perform different options on the lookups. So same way we have for packages and we have for agent. So without this role, you cannot perform on operations on OIC different instance. And obviously, like having their different flexibilities. So you cannot perform actions use without if you don't have that privileges or your role assigned to that. For example, if your user I is not service developer or service administrator, you cannot even view your agent created in the system, or you cannot download the agent. So only user having service administrator access can download the agent here. You can say agent download option. If your user doesn't have the service administrator role, even if your user having the service developer role, your user won't be able to download the connectivity agent. That's quite what will secure integrations they have. And same for libraries, that packages and all. So these all are the endpoint, uh, or that the roles and privileges we have for this integration. So thank you so much everyone for being here and joining the session. If you have any queries and you want to ask, you feel free. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your doubts if you have any.